All right, so we're kicking things off today with a really interesting quote that got me thinking. And it is, "We know more than we can tell." And this is from Michael Polanyi.
Okay.
And I think it's the perfect lead-in for what we're going to be diving into today, which is this fascinating concept of deep smart.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about deep smart, we're really talking about, not just like textbook knowledge. It's that deeply personal, experience-based understanding that you kind of accumulate over time.
Right, it's that gut feeling you get.
Yeah, yeah, and the ability to kind of like just know what to do even in these like super complex situations.
Yeah, or even just having seen so many different variations of something that you develop this ability to kind of size things up in a way that, like you said, you can't even really articulate.
But it's not always easy to explain, but it consistently leads to successful outcomes.
Right. Right. And I think that's what's really interesting about this whole concept is that, like, in the business world today, we're always, looking for the next, big thing in terms of innovation and creativity and all these other attributes.
Right.
But deep smart is kind of like the bedrock, it seems like, that makes all of that other stuff possible.
I think that's a great point. And what stood out to me from the material we read was that it's really about knowing how it's not just about having information, but it's that ingrained know-how to actually like use it effectively.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the nuances and the context and being able to apply that knowledge in a practical way.
It's almost like a three-legged stool if you think about it.
Yeah.
Because the article talks about emotional intelligence,
Mhm.
being able to understand and manage emotions, and then cultural intelligence, which is, being able to effectively navigate across different cultural landscapes.
Right.
And then on top of that, you've got this just practical, like, feet on the ground, understanding of how things really work.
Absolutely. All that is critical in today's environment where we're just inundated with information.
Right.
Right. It's like we're drowning in it.
Right.
And the sources even call information the cash cow.
Right.
So whether you're someone who's, preparing for a really important meeting, or you're trying to get up to speed on a new industry, or you're just, driven by curiosity, having access to that reliable knowledge is key.
Yeah, you need to be able to cut through all that noise
Yeah,
and really focus on the things that matter.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why this deep dive into deep smart is so important. It's about helping you understand the value of this particular kind of knowledge and how it can help you navigate that complex landscape.
Yeah, and one of the things that really struck me in reading through this was, we're always talking about, all these different, aspects of like, culture and integrity and innovation and resilience and empathy and teamwork and focus.
Like a laundry list.
Yeah, yeah, it's a laundry list of things, but one of the things that this article really seems to suggest is that maybe instead of trying to focus on all of those things individually,
Mhm.
maybe the answer is to cultivate deep smart. And that will actually take care of a lot of those things.
Yeah, I think that's a really fascinating idea. It's like shooting one arrow and hitting multiple targets,
Yeah.
right? Instead of trying to aim at each one individually, you focus on cultivating that deep understanding, and it has a ripple effect across all those other areas.
Yeah. So by really focusing on that deep experiential understanding within our teams,
Right.
we might actually see improvements across the board in their ability to bounce back from setbacks, in the way that they understand each other and work with each other,
Yeah.
in their problem-solving abilities, all of those things.
I think that's the premise. And the article suggests that by prioritizing deep smart, you're not just making your workforce more knowledgeable,
Yeah.
you're fostering a whole suite of positive traits, almost as a natural consequence.
Right.
So think about it. Someone with deep smart in their field likely has a really strong intuitive sense of potential pitfalls, which speaks to integrity. Someone who's successfully navigated complex projects probably has really strong teamwork skills. It all kind of ties together.
Right. It's almost like it's the foundation for all these other,
Yeah, it's that underlying wisdom.
yeah, the underlying wisdom that kind of informs all of those other aspects.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we cultivate this deep smart?
Well, the article introduces a really interesting framework called the OPPTY framework.
OPPTY?
Yeah, and it stands for observation practice, partnering, joint problem solving, and taking responsibility.
Yeah.
And is presented as a really practical way to foster that growth and sharing of deep smart.
Okay.
So let's start with O for observation.
Okay.
And it's all about creating opportunities, especially for, less experienced individuals, to observe seasoned professionals in action. And it's not just about seeing what they do, but really understanding how they approach situations,
Yeah.
their decision-making process, the way they interact with others, those subtle nuances that contribute to their effectiveness.
Right, so it's not just the technical steps, it's all of the stuff around it.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about absorbing those unspoken rules and behaviors that are part of their deep knowledge.
Yeah.
And then we move on to P for practice.
Okay.
And this is where the learning really sticks.
Yeah.
It's about giving people the chance to apply what they've observed in real-world scenarios
Right.
so they can internalize those skills and start building their own deep smart.
Right. So observation sets the stage and then practice solidifies it.
Yeah. And this isn't just about technical tasks either.
Mm.
It's about practicing things like strategic thinking,
Yeah.
effective communication,
Right.
all those really important skills.
Okay, so we've got the two P's, observation and practice. What about the next P, which is partnering?
Yeah, so partnering is super powerful, especially when it comes to bridging generational divides within an organization. You've got these experienced colleagues with a wealth of accumulated knowledge, and then you have newer employees who often bring fresh perspectives, familiarity with the latest tools and technologies. So this cross-generational collaboration creates this really natural flow of learning in both directions.
Right, so it's a two-way street.
Exactly. It's about leveraging the strengths of each generation.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so now we're on to J for joint problem solving.
Yeah, and joint problem solving kind of takes collaboration to the next level. It's when diverse teams come together to tackle specific challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, they naturally pool both their explicit knowledge and their deep smart.
Mm-hmm.
And this leads to more creative and robust solutions because you're integrating all these different viewpoints. But it also fosters things like empathy and mutual respect as team members really work to understand each other's strengths and experiences.
Yeah, so you're learning by doing together, which is really powerful.
Absolutely. And then finally, we have T for taking responsibility.
Okay.
And this is key for making knowledge sharing sustainable. When individuals feel accountable for their own development
Yeah.
and also for contributing to the collective wisdom of the organization,
Right.
they're way more likely to actively engage in creating that environment of trust and open communication that allows deep smart to flourish.
Right. It's about taking ownership.
Exactly.
So it sounds like this OPPTY framework is a really comprehensive way to not just transfer information, but to cultivate those human skills that underpin deep smart.
Absolutely. It's about creating a holistic approach to knowledge sharing.
Yeah, and the article also highlights this idea of embedding knowledge sharing into the very fabric of the organization,
Yeah.
starting with recruitment and onboarding.
Yeah, so during the hiring process, it's not just about looking at, technical qualifications on paper, but companies should also be assessing candidates for their interpersonal skills,
Mm-hmm.
their curiosity, their eagerness to learn, their ability to connect with others. Behavioral interviews and assessments that can identify collaborative tendencies and an openness to mentorship can be really valuable.
Yeah, so you're looking for those soft skills that indicate that they're going to be open to this.
Exactly. And then onboarding becomes a crucial opportunity to set those expectations.
Okay.
Introducing new hires to the principles of knowledge sharing and frameworks like OPTY
Mm-hmm.
right from the start signals that this isn't just an afterthought. It's
Awesome.
fundamental to how the organization operates.
It's part of the DNA.
Exactly. It establishes that expectation of continuous learning and collaboration.
The article also talks about creating a knowledge repository.
Yeah.
So how does that work with Deep Smart, which is often described as being so personal and hard to articulate?
That's a great question. And while a traditional database, is great for storing explicit knowledge, like documents and procedures, capturing that tacit knowledge requires a more nuanced approach.
Okay.
So the idea is to create this dynamic and interactive platform where employees can share stories, reflect on past experiences, and articulate those key insights they've gained.
Right.
And that makes the repository a much richer and more valuable resource.
So it's not just a static archive. It's a living, breathing.
Exactly. It's about creating a space for ongoing dialogue where people can ask questions, share solutions, work through challenges collaboratively, and that helps to surface and disseminate some of that harder to capture deep smart.
Okay. And the article mentions things like internal blogs and forums as ways to do that.
Exactly. It's about providing different avenues for people to share their knowledge and experiences.
Okay, so then there's this idea of bringing different generations together.
Yeah.
And the article really emphasizes the value of this cross-generational collaboration.
Yeah, and this is where you see the real power of that two-way learning we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Formal mentorship programs, including reverse mentoring, where younger employees share their tech expertise with more experienced colleagues, can be incredibly impactful. And These relationships not only bridge skill gaps, but they also build empathy and cultural understanding as people learn from different perspectives and experiences.
Yeah, so it's not just about the skills, it's about building those relationships and understanding.
Exactly.
And it doesn't have to be formal programs,
Yeah,
right?
no, not at all. Just creating opportunities for diverse teams with different levels of experience to work together on projects can naturally foster that exchange.
Right, because then they're having to rely on each other and learn from each other in order to get the work done.
Absolutely. That joint problem solving in mixed experience teams allows for that natural transfer of tacit knowledge, and it can spark so much innovation and creativity.
The article also mentions some things that might sound a little bit more fun, like using gamification and recognition to encourage knowledge sharing.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't love a little friendly competition, right?
Right.
Implementing things like points, systems for participating in mentorship, contributing to the knowledge base, leading knowledge sharing sessions. All of that can provide positive reinforcement and just make the process more enjoyable.
Make it more fun.
Yeah, and publicly recognizing those individuals who actively share their expertise can be a really powerful motivator.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we all like to be acknowledged for our contributions,
Exactly.
but it seems like none of these strategies can really take root without a strong foundation of trust within the organization.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Deep Smart thrives in an environment where employees feel psychologically safe to share their perspectives, to admit to mistakes, to ask for help without fear of judgment.
Mm.
So building that trust through transparent leadership,
Yeah.
open communication, and a culture of mutual respect is absolutely essential.
Yeah, that's got to be the foundation for all of this to work.
It's the bedrock.
So to kind of sum up, it sounds like this whole concept of deep smart is really about recognizing and valuing that profound knowledge that comes from experience and intentionally building systems and a culture that allows that knowledge to be shared and leveraged for the benefit of the whole organization.
Yeah, it's about moving beyond just surface level information and tapping into that much deeper well of know-how.
Exactly. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive, and I want to leave you with one last thought from our source material, which says,
Okay.
you may be replaced before your funeral is over, but your knowledge and experience will definitely leave a gap only if organizations find a way to pass it on.
Wow, that's really powerful.
It is, and it really underscores, I think, everything that we've talked about today.
Yeah, for sure.
So as you go forward today, think about this. How can you or your organization better nurture this deep, smart exchange? Where does that critical know-how reside within your teams? And what are some practical steps you can take to share it more effectively?
Mm,
Remember, it's not just about having access to information, it's about deeply understanding it and applying it.
right.
So what's one concrete action you can take, maybe even today, to encourage this kind of learning and growth around you?
Yeah, think about that.
And that's it for us today. We'll see you next time. See you later.